Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Amanda Dyer, the co-director and producer of the documentary film Unseen: How We're Failing Parent Caregivers and Why It Matters. Today, we are talking about faith in caregiving. Data shows that 70% of caregivers report that faith has a great deal of importance in their lives, so we know it's an important topic to this community. Plus, faith can just be a really complex topic, and then caregiving adds a whole other dimension on top of that. So I think this should be a very interesting conversation. And today I am joined by some amazing people and caregivers. I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
All right. Well, I'll go first. My name is Joshua Tate, and I'm here in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm a father and also a husband. But me and my wife, we have three children, and two of our children, they have a special needs condition called osteogenesis imperfecta. And me and my wife, we actually met like this. A fun fact. We met when we were 12 and 13 years old, and so when we were that young, we decided like I told her after 2 years of knowing her, I said, you're going to be my wife, you're going to have my kids, and we're going to have a family. And 10 years later, like we have a family. And so that's a real blessing. But beyond that as well, I'm also an ordained minister and I'm an entrepreneur as well.
Yes, and I am Crystal. I'm his wife. I'm Joshua's wife. We've been married for almost 8 years, and like you said, we have three children. And here's one of them, Joseph. Here, he was waving hi at the beginning. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I've been a stay-at-home mom pretty much for the course of motherhood for me, which is almost 6 years. And I also am a content creator and I also help my husband with his businesses as well. So we're business partners.
Awesome. I'm Ashley Pagankoff. I am a wife to Ross. We've been married for 17 years, and then we have three daughters. We have Emmeline, who's 13, Averly, who is 11, and Maylee, who's 9. And I am a child life specialist here at Cook Children's in Fort Worth, Texas, in the emergency department. I've worked at Cook for almost 20 years. Um, about 19 and a half years at this point, and I love it. But my middle daughter was diagnosed in 2022 with a brain tumor. So we have been down a different journey of walking through that. And she had surgery when she was in 2022, and we have been continuing to be followed at St. Jude's in Memphis. And so that we're connected with Spreading Sunshine through that. And so, yeah, that is us. My husband is also a nurse in management now. So we have a lot of medical experience on our side, but being thrown into it's a little bit different. So.
And I'm Christy Pritchard, and my husband Michael and I, and our two sons, Zachary and Daniel, we live here in Memphis, Tennessee. We are an adoptive, transracial, special needs family, all the things. Our family, we laugh and say that there's no part of us that is typical about our family. I too, at this moment, am a stay-at-home mom by profession. I'm actually a minister as well. My husband is a minister. And we say, Ashley, kind of like you in your profession, we say that for years we spoke to people, we have encouraged people on their faith journeys. And it's a whole different story though when you get thrown into this journey. But presently I stay at home with the boys, and they're 12 and 14, like I mentioned.
Hello, everyone. I'm Diane Smith, and I am the Executive Director of Spreading Sunshine. I am not a caregiver. I do have four grown children and two grandchildren. A part of my role at Spreading Sunshine, I get the privilege of interacting with so many caregivers. And I'm so excited about today's discussion because one of the things that we hear a lot is families and caregivers have a difficult time kind of fitting into church. And so I'm excited to kind of hear what ideas we come up with today.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I'm so excited to chat with everyone. And if you're joining us live, please feel free to join the chat, drop in any questions you might have for our panelists, and we'll try to do our best to incorporate them as we go along. definitely ask that everyone be mindful that we may have folks joining from many different faith backgrounds, no faith backgrounds, whatever that looks like. So very different experiences. So please be respectful and understanding of that, but would definitely love to hear your thoughts and just have that community experience as we chat. All right. So let's dive in. All right. I'm going to start off with a real zinger of a question. How has becoming a caregiver impacted your faith? I know that's really broad. So just kind of take that, let that just guide you wherever you want to go with that.
Well, for me, faith, like me being a caregiver, has impacted my faith in two ways. And what I would like to start it off with, I'll start it off like when I first became a caregiver. And so in the very beginning, like I didn't know how I was going to, I didn't know what this journey was going to be like. And so my faith definitely, like, it instilled in me like, hey, I'm going to make it through this, right? When me and my wife, when we were in the hospital, not knowing if our son was going to live because of his condition, what got us through that was believing and having hope, right? And having faith, like we're going to make it through. And I'll say continuing in our journey, then after, getting into regular life, some days it's hard. Some days it gets difficult because it's trying to understand, right? From me, my perspective, when I used to read the Bible, it was like, okay, like I believe in God, I'm a Christian and I shouldn't have to go through this, right? And so it's a part to where it's like, God, you let me down, right? My faith let me down because I believe. But then as I go on with life, I'm reassured that, God is still with me. And even though, like the Bible says, healing and believing that God can heal, but my son and my family, like they're not healed. It's a challenge, day by day, but I'm taking it day by day. Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you had follow them up.
Okay. Yeah, so I would just say for me, I feel like at the beginning it was really hard because I was already like new to the faith in general. Like I didn't grow up going to church or having a relationship with God at all. And so at that point I was very complex. I was confused. I had like a lot of questions because I thought like, hey, I gave my life to God and I thought that things would go a certain way, like I thought everything would just be a certain way, like better or, just in a different, like I had a different outlook for my life and for my children especially. And so when they did come about, or when our first son was diagnosed with the condition, I just had a lot of questions and I felt like, how could this happen? Or, how could I turn my life around and then this happened to my life? Or, like I just kind of made it like as if it was such a bad thing. But as I went along and as I got older and as I'm maturing more and even more in the faith, I'm still like, I have the questions, but then I'm also connected. And I feel like I have some questions that are different in a way to where it's like I can say that I'm growing in my relationship with God even more, even though I still have this challenge that I'm dealing with. I feel like I'm growing.
Sorry, Christy got muted. Were you finished?
Yes.
Christy, did you want to add something?
Just a very similar thing. Like I mentioned, I became a follower of Christ very early on, and then ended up going into the ministry as a career. And I think I can speak for my husband and I. We both dedicated and gave our life over to teaching people about who God is and how much He loves them, and about faith and having a practicing faith. And we laugh and say that we laugh and say that when we got the call about our sons, I think the Lord said, okay, buckle up. You thought you had faith before this. We're really going to see, what this is about. I mentioned we're an adoptive family. It's really, the irony is when we adopted our sons, before you adopt, you fill out all this paperwork as to basically what type of child you're looking to bring into your home. And we were open to everything, whatever ethnic background, whatever age, whatever gender. The one stipulation we said to our adoption agency and pretty much to the Lord as well was, we do not feel prepared for special needs. Like that was the one thing we told our adoption agency, and we told God. And our boys ended up coming home on the same day. They're biological brothers. And Daniel, our special needs son, was 6 months old, and he wasn't showing any signs at that point of having special needs. And so we always just, God knew, but we certainly didn't. And that has been a journey, just having multiple conversations with the Lord of, hey, we said no. Like, we basically told you no on this. And yet realizing that he had a completely different journey for us. And it wasn't even an easy one. It's been a hard one. So there's been a lot of questions, lots of whys. So it's been a challenge to our faith. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I've been a believer since a young age also, and I think that my faith had been, I mean, I considered myself to have a really solid faith before Averly's diagnosis, and we had other challenges thrown at us in different situations. Like my youngest was a NICU baby and born really early. I mean, there are little things along the way that required faith and that were faith building, but I think I've worked with patients and families who have had horrible diagnoses, and I've been in multiple deaths, and I've helped parents through grief and bereavement, and I've gone through all kinds of things, right? In all kinds of settings, and um had worked at cancer camp for 9 years. And so I had always said, like, I could never do the job I do without my faith. And then I think with Averly, it was this whole different level. I had a moment in my kitchen with the Lord where I was like, I need to know that you're good. Like, I need to know that you're still good, even in the midst of all of this, that you will be good and that I will see your goodness. And we have seen his goodness. And I think a big thing that the Lord has spoken to me over all of this time is that the miracle of everything that we've experienced, the miracle is actually just in his presence. It's not in him taking the brain tumor away. It's not in him healing. It's not in that. It's in his presence. It's in him. It's in doing life with him. And for that, that has been through other people we've met. I mean, his presence has shown up in multiple ways. I mean, I think one of the things I say often is our world grew the minute that Averly was diagnosed. And so it was absolutely like, I mean, it just grew. Our whole world grew, and we've experienced so many different stories and so many people's lives because of it. And so that has also grown my faith. Like, I have seen God work through other people's lives and other people's stories and gotten to see him show up. So I think there became a moment where I had to decide, do I believe you're good? And if I believe you're good, am I going to walk this out? And how am I going to walk this out? And that doesn't come without questions. It doesn't come without the mystery of things and the hard parts of it and the frustrating parts of it and all of that. But it has been, I've seen him over and over and over again. And I believe I will continue to. So.
Greg had an interesting comment about the community side of faith. He said, for me, it's less about faith and more about having a community/tribe to be a part of. And I think that is a big part of it for a lot of people. When you became disability parents, how did that affect the community aspect of your faith?
That's good.
You want to start on the other side? Ashley, jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Our community, we had a pretty established community, and I do feel like it's interesting. I just had a conversation with a friend a little bit about this. Like, everybody has something happening in their lives, right? That's difficult or something that's going on. And so I think like our community was so supportive, especially in the beginning. They've rallied, I had people show up for Averly's brain surgery as a surprise in Memphis. Like my best friends from high school drove. Like we have this solid community of people around us. And, we've recently found out that like Averly's brain tumor has grown and we're going to need surgery again. And like, so there's all these levels of different pieces of it. But um, I think as a person in this space, I have learned to really appreciate how people show up. And even if it's not like perfect, I'm so grateful for it. Like they're trying to show up and be community to us. So whatever it might be, whatever it looks like, whether it's just a text or, I mean, some people just don't know how to enter into suffering the same way. And so I think you have to have people around you like this kind of community that are doing it too. But also the people that don't know or haven't experienced that yet in their lives or something, or their life there's a different challenge of a different kind in their life, then I've just learned to be grateful for the way that they show up. Um, and I do believe, I mean, we couldn't do it without the community that we have around us. And it's been, I mean, even just like provision, like meeting needs for us, especially when we were traveling and everything, it was crazy. I was blown away. Like people are incredibly generous. And I had no idea. My work community surrounded us. So, I mean, I've just gotten to see the very best of people, if I'm being honest, like in this experience. Like you get to see how good people can be and or God can be good through them. And so
that's a positive one. I hear. I'm so very, very glad to hear that has been your experience. So, but yeah, we definitely hear talking to caregivers a lot of a really wide range of do people show up? Or do they?
It's true. I believe that. Like you have people who can't show up and can't do it, and I believe that, and I know that, and they don't do it well, and they step out of friendship because they're scared or they don't know how to do it well, and that's really sad. It really is a hard part of this, and I know people experience that. And I have friends that I thought would show up differently that didn't show up the way I hoped they would in different situations. And I think that's just where the grace has had to come in because I don't know why, And so anyway.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm so sorry. I feel like I jump on top of you all the time. Well, I was going to say, so that's such a great question because our son came home when he was 6 months old and he's 12 now. So we've been walking this journey now for about 12 years. And it was just a learning curve for us about community. I think it really is. As a caregiver, you have got to learn how to accept community. And because let's get real, this is a very tiring journey. And sometimes it takes effort to accept community, if that makes any sense. And sometimes you just don't have it in you. You just want to kind of hole up in your home and just kind of put your, just kind of grit your teeth and make it through it. But something that my husband and I talk about a lot is community doesn't have to be made up completely. And Ashley, you alluded to this. Community doesn't have to be made up completely of people who completely get it. And I think that there was a time that I thought people can't be my community unless they totally get everything I'm feeling and have had the experience themselves. And I talk about that. I kind of have concentric circles of community. I have a couple of people in my life that get it because they're walking through it. But the truth of the matter is I have a ton of people who want to love on us. They might not know completely how. And so accepting, hey, y'all are still my community, and I might have to teach you how to love on us. But sometimes I think we have to make an effort to have community, which is hard because you're exhausted. You're so tired. But I think there was a time in my life where I judged people because I was like, you don't get me and you don't know how to love on me and all that stuff. But I just had to realize, and I think this comes through also in our lives through adoption. Not everybody in our community gets adoption. Yeah. They don't understand how that works. And they don't understand all the baggage that comes with that. But accepting that they still want to be our community. And like you said, grace, just allowing people grace and letting them in.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I want to just say something to what you were saying, because for me and my family, we experienced both sides. We experienced well, for a portion, we experienced the other side of not having community. But when we first had our first special needs son, we had so much community, like people, and it was really a joy to see because we never really knew that people were on our side the way that they came through for us, right? With prayers, with asking us, hey, what do you guys need? Do you need help with this? Can I, like, it was amazing where one of our friends, like, we were scared to hold our son. And like one of our friends, like she
Mhm.
just grabbed him and said, ooh, and you see, having a community in that moment, like it was really good. People who, could carry the burden with us. And like one thing that's really was amazing about it was one of the questions that I had as a father was like, what would happen if me and my wife are not here? Like, what would happen to my children, right? But knowing that having a community around you, like if anything were to happen to me and my wife, knowing like, hey, we have a community of people that really love our children like they're their own, that's really, really good. And moving on further than that, we had some things happen in life to where the community that we had, it wasn't there anymore. And it showed up at the same time when we had our second son and we found out that he was about to have a special needs condition. And in that moment, it was really difficult because when you're all alone and you feel like, man, I have no support, and we're going to, like, me and my wife, we were like, man, we're going to go through this again. And the first experience was very difficult. And for me as a husband, knowing like, hey, we didn't have that community anymore, for me, it was like, okay, I know that we need community. And so in the portion when we didn't have community, it was really bad for us. Like it was days where like me and my wife, like we were depressed, just saying it like that. We were depressed because we're all alone, not knowing like how we're going to get through this, not having the support that we had the first time around. But the amazing thing about it that I see, like what you were saying, Christy, is you have to open up and accept community, right? And so the amazing thing in that moment, when I knew like, hey, we need support. My wife, she needs support. I need support. I actually looked up and I went like because I was like, I don't want my wife to go through this alone. I know I maybe can handle it, right? Because, guys, we have, pride. Like when things happen, it's like I'm just gonna make it happen. But I said I can't allow my wife to go through this alone. And so we actually reached out to find support and find a new community. And the great thing about it, like we're like the community that we had, we're rebuilding our relationship. But the great thing is, even in that moment, we found a new community, right? And we got connected with this organization called Spreading Sunshine, and it has been a blessing in our life, right? And so it's amazing to see, like, if you do open up yourself, right? If you don't have community, it's just amazing to see, what you can have.
Good.
Yes, I definitely agree. And even at the beginning, like you said, Christy, you're talking to, well, both of you really, you were talking about like opening up yourself and just like for me, I felt like I kind of was like, like people, they can't really understand what I'm going through. They can't understand all, like their children doesn't have special needs or they don't have this and they don't have that. I would do the comparison game basically. But then it was like, but they still are showing up and they still want to show up. And I have to be the one to be like, okay, I appreciate you showing up even if you can't fully understand, at least someone is trying to give a listening ear, and someone's there to pray for you. Someone's there to come to your home and just, like stand in the gap for you in prayer or bringing meals and just different things. People will show up in so many different ways, and it was just like I had to be like, okay, this is still good. Even if they can't fully understand, I can still show true appreciation for all of the support and all of the help that we've been getting. And just like Joshua said, like at first it started off really, really strong. And then we had that moment where we were alone. And then now we're like getting into the place where we're building and rebuilding. And like when we were alone, that was like the hardest part. I feel like, because you do need support. Like in anything that you go through in life, everyone needs support. And so like having that support and having a community is really important for us.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I hear all the time just that, and it's just, common sense, regardless if you're a caregiver or not. The community aspect makes all the difference. And if you do feel really tied to your faith and then feel like that community is not being there for you, like not coming alongside you in this difficult time. I mean, that's hard to really not feel abandoned, but I'm hearing your advice is try to keep that open mind and room for people to come in, even if they don't do it exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I and if somebody's listening that's not a caregiver but wanting to care for someone who is a caregiver, I think my community that was established before this part of our journey started up, I think the ones that admit to it and say, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get it, but I love
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I need your help in knowing how to love you, but I'm just going to go ahead and be the first to tell you my house does our home looks nothing like your home. So I can't empathize with you. I think those are the ones that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna I can have faith, in that. And let me just say, I think that community in itself is from the Lord. I think Ashley, you said that earlier. I think that's an example of the goodness of the Lord. And I want to follow up on what I said earlier. Raising our son has been the hardest thing. And I probably question God more through that journey than I ever have. But I would like to say that every time I have questioned the Lord, he has been able to handle that. And he has been very patient with me and with us, and he has provided every single time. So although this has been probably the hardest thing on my faith, in my life, it has also grown my faith more than any other experience in my life. And I think I tell that to people all the time that one of the things that I've been reminded about in my faith is that God can handle all of my anger. God can handle all of my questions. He's big enough because he knows it anyway. He knows that about me anyway. He knows that about my situation. And my faith is in my God, not in my circumstances. Because we live in a hard, broken world. And for people like us, that hits the closest, that brokenness, by being a caregiver of a special needs child, the brokenness of the world enters into your home. It enters into the most protected space of your life. And there are a lot of times you just don't know what to do about that. And so that's why I feel like my faith has gotten stronger, because I realize God is the only one who can handle that brokenness in our home.
I want to acknowledge Joelle made a comment too. She said, I don't expect most people to understand. I wouldn't want them to, but I can't advocate for myself while we're treading water as a family. I don't know that I have an answer for that, but just the acknowledgement that you're right. Like when you're at max capacity, trying to think of like, how can I teach someone to help me is just one more thing to-do list. So
and I would like to say, I get that. Like, I want to acknowledge the hardness of that. And if I alluded to anything that is opposite to that, I apologize for that.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to imply that at all. Just wanted to see
but
that.
I've been there. Yeah. Water is such a great descriptive language to put to that, because I think we've all felt that, definitely, and been there.
So let me switch gears a little bit. I saw a stat, and this was specifically from a Christian organization, but they did a survey that said 99% of surveyed U.S. pastors believe individuals and families impacted by disability would feel welcome and included at their church. But 86.5% of church attending families whose children have disabilities don't feel welcome and said their church needs more awareness and training. So we have leaders saying, yes, of course you're welcome. And then we have the actual family saying, most of them saying, no, I don't feel welcome at all. What's going on there? What's the disconnect?
Well, what I believe is the disconnect, right, is that in order to know what caregivers need, you have to talk to them, right? So I know a lot of people just assume, right, like, hey, we're a church and like, we welcome everyone, right? But is the space created for families with special needs, right? I know a lot of churches that I've been to, like me and my wife, like I I have to pick my son up in his wheelchair, right, to go up the stairs rather than having a wheelchair accessible ramp. And so it's just certain things that I feel like from our leaders, in ministry, they have to actually talk and engage with families with special needs to see, how can we serve you? Because it's a disconnect when we come inside, to go to the service, but we have to sit way in the back because there's no room for us anywhere else, right? And we're cast off
Mhm.
to the side because, we can't fit in the aisle with the wheelchair. So we have to be all the way in the back, like an outcast. And I understand, but if we can make that space, better, right? We can make it better to where we can actually be involved in the service and not put to the back or put to the side or have to wait in the lobby and watch it on the screen outside. So
Yeah,
mhm.
it sends a message whether or not that's intentional. It makes you feel that way, and that's reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a lack of, I mean, exactly what he's saying. There's a disconnect. Like, you want to believe that you're very welcoming, but like when the rubber meets the road, like, do you have people trained in with that have, with kiddos that may have special needs or have autism, or what does that look like? Because that looks different in a classroom when you're taking care of those kiddos and like offering kids services to everyone. I think a lot of families with special needs kiddos feel like they can't take their kiddo in there, because they're not sure they're going to be safe. They don't know for sure that it's going to be the right space. And I think that that's, you again, like you said, you can say like that you're welcoming to everyone, but like when the rubber meets the road, it doesn't feel welcoming because you don't actually have the things that you need to serve the families that are there. And I do think that there is a lack of asking the questions and seeing like what would be helpful and what would serve them well. Um, and I would think that people even feel that way in the elderly community also. Like, I think you see it on the other end of things too, on the other side of that, like, they can no longer make it to church, but is anybody picking them up? Like, there's just some things like that that I think happens all along the way, that there is this unseen place of that and the forgotten piece of that. And there is definitely a disconnect.
Yes.
Joshua, I don't know.
Sorry,
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Joshua, I don't know if you feel like this. You said that you're an ordained minister. I know for my husband and I, as ministers, it's been a very humbling experience to become the caregiver and look back on the past and go, were we those people? Were we those ministers who did not know? I mean, it's just really, you kind of are like, yee, kind of thing. I think
Absolutely.
it's also, yeah, I think it's also hard because the umbrella of special needs is so large, and special needs spans such a great variety. And so I think I think a lot of pastors are like, oh yeah, we're welcoming to special needs, but they have one type of special need in their head when they say that. But they might not have met my child. They don't know my child, and they don't know all the needs that my child is going to require of them to have. And so it, I don't say this lightly, like it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to be that parent that might have grown up in the church, but can't take their kid to church.
Yes.
It's hard, and I love that we're having this discussion because I believe that answers can't be had until we just are honest in our discussions about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I
Right.
feel like I just want to add one more thing for me. I mean, for me, I feel like a lot of times I've seen and heard about people and like in the church, like the leaders and things like they'll begin to pray for your child. And like that could be offensive for some parents because it's like,
Mm,
are you saying that my child like is demonic or has something wrong with him per se or her? And it's just like sometimes if we don't ask for prayer for specific things, I don't think that, I mean, I feel like sometimes like that, like and they'll do it from a good place, their hearts are probably in the right place, but it's just like it can be offensive sometimes. And I feel like sometimes that'll cast people off. They'll be like, I don't want to, I don't want to go back to that church because they they made my child feel or look a certain way to the entire church. And that could be embarrassing to some people.
Yeah, that's really good. I would like to just even add to what she's saying, because I'll say with our background, uh it has been some difficult moments because uh believing in God, pastors and leaders, it's like God can heal, right? God can heal. And just pointing it out to where it makes us seem like, well, our children are a mistake, right? We're a
Yeah.
mistake, or we've done something wrong, or we're doing something wrong, right? We need to pray more so God can heal our children. And so it's been environments that we've been into where it was like that, right? And I've heard different families and different parents who speak about this as well, to where like some churches you just can't go to because they don't have the understanding of like, okay, God is still God and God made our children this
Yeah.
way. Our children are still special. They're not a curse, right? They're not a curse from God. No, they're gifts and they're a blessing from God. And so
Yeah.
having just being aware and having a better understanding, like, hey, our children and families who have children with special needs, they're not a mistake. Like if you even look in the scripture where it was the child with the special needs, right? And they asked, like, who sinned? Who did the sin? Who did this?
Yeah.
And I feel like churches, some churches today are just like that.
Yeah.
Like where did it go wrong? Where did it go wrong? But it's nothing that went wrong. It's just so God's glory could be revealed. And so I definitely believe like we have a long, we got some ways to go to where people can understand like having children with special needs. It's not on the negative side, right? It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just getting to where there's that understanding that disability is just a part of life. It's just part of the human experience and um, just a fact of life. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I definitely think, you have to protect yourself as the family to, sometimes there's just environments that you shouldn't be in because it's more harmful than helpful. Um, what about, I wanted to ask you all, someone said, about being included or welcomed in a faith community or place of worship. How do, finding ways to include the disabled children in the learning, participating activities? What are some ways you've seen that be successful? Maybe Diane, I know you talk to a lot of different groups. Is there any that you've seen are good examples of that?
I think that we have a few churches here locally in Memphis that do a really good job. And I think it does begin with, like Joshua, I think Joshua said, having the conversation, asking the questions. And I think sometimes it's easy. My husband's a pastor at a church. So sometimes it's easy to think you have to have everything perfect, right? And I think it's more relational, like asking the questions, and doing what you can to make accommodations. Some churches are small, some churches are big. Bigger churches might have more resources than smaller churches. But I think it's a caring individual or caring group of people who ask the questions and work to make those accommodations together. And so I think involving the parents in that conversation is pretty important, right? So
Yes. No, absolutely.
That made me think of, I remember talking to someone just in our work in this area, and she said, our organization they worked with thought they were helping and was creating this like new ministry or program that was going to be oriented for disabled families. And then all the families had to actually lead it themselves and execute it. And it was, basically just adding a bunch of work for them all to do. And like, it might have been a great program, but it really was just becoming one more thing on the to-do list for that parent to do. So one thing I'm always kind of want to make sure we bring up is like for the faith community to really be providing that support, it's got to come from other people besides the caregivers themselves. Have you all run across that where you're kind of doing the supporting yourselves?
I would say amen to that. Like it is, and churches don't realize that they're doing it. It happens. They don't realize it, but I think they're like, oh, you're the most educated on it, so you could come in and do it. So I think that I love that you brought that up, and I appreciate you bringing that up. But what that does is that does create a need for training. That does create. I mean, it takes time. It takes a lot. It's not an easy go-to overnight solution for a church at all. And I think that, but I think the church needs to know that if they are going to embark on that, it's going to take time in order for it to be what it needs to be. And that's okay. That's okay that it takes time. It's not an overnight fix. It's not hey, we can bring 5 youth in to take care of the kids while we do this, kind of thing. That's not just going to work. Another point I wanted to bring out, I think we need to remind churches too, and I would love to hear y'all's feedback on this, that being a church community doesn't have to happen in the church walls. Mm. Like, churches can minister to families, and I think this is why we all love this organization. We've mentioned Spreading Sunshine. Churches can take lessons from organizations like Spreading Sunshine in that they say, how can we meet your needs? And you don't have to come to the church for that to happen, kind of thing. And the church can be the church to them in their own homes, and that, of course, again, has to go as a caregiver, you need to set those paradigms and say, this is what's good for our family and all of that. But I want churches to hear, you don't have to have, disabled families don't have to come into your church in order for you to be the church to them.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why I keep even saying like faith community, not just church. Like that's just one expression of that. So yeah, I think that's important to know. Like you can have a community that is based around, the spiritual side of life and your faith, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to, there's not just one way to do that. And finding that community, or if you're already in that community, figuring out how to make that hopefully that community is figuring out how to make it a place of support and a place of growth and encouragement versus, a drain or something that you're trying to heal from. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, that it's not just about a building or a place that you go to.
Yeah. Because I'm more likely to feel safe bringing my child into your context if you have already reached out and become a part of my context. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have more trust in you for that.
Mm-hmm. Back to kind of the accessibility side of it. I talked to someone just this week who works in building accessibility, and he told me that he often gets pushback from specifically religious organizations who say like, oh, we don't actually have to follow the ADA rules, which isn't necessarily true. But the bigger thing is we don't actually have anyone with disabilities here. So, we don't need the ramp, or we don't need to spend the extra money on the adult changing table or handicap stalls, whatever. So obviously there's an issue there. If a disabled person can't get into your building, you're not going to see them. So you're saying they're not here, but you haven't created an environment. How does that, like just those really practical things, or the lack thereof, impact your families? Anybody want to jump in?
I mean, I haven't seen it affect our family. I think that other people could probably speak to this better, but I know of plenty of friends and family who this affects greatly and who it's become more of an issue for them too. And I think, I mean, again, if you're going to be open and welcoming, then you don't have those people there because they don't feel safe there. And so I think that it's a piece of those conversations. And it's really hard because it's like, as a caregiver, you can put, I think it's going to have to be people who are not living in it that advocate for it, which is, I think, where some of these other organizations come from. Because let's be honest, like the people who are living in that are tired. And it's like you can bring it to church leadership, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be the person leading that rally to get it done, kind of thing. Like that's not going to happen. And so I think organizations advocating for that for families is awesome, but they don't have those people there because they're not making it a safe space for them. And people do just stop going to church, or they do just stop attending vacation Bible school, or or whatever it might be because of that. And I think, yeah, I think that takes people who have a passion to serve caregivers to go in and have those conversations. I mean, maybe a caregiver starts that conversation, but I don't think it's fair to think that they're going to finish it and that they're going to be a part of making it happen. So
That's a great
I
point.
interrupted you.
What about we all, I think about everyone has a wide array of needs, spiritual, social, physical, financial, all these things. Where do you feel like that faith-based communities are equipped to help the most, like in any particular arena?
Well, for me, number one, I would say spiritually. And I mean, right, just spiritually but it also depends on which church you go to. And that's what I would say, because even with me and my family's experience, like even now, like sorry about that, our mindset has changed to where it's like, give me 1 second.
went dark on it.
I know.
All right,
Where did
sorry about
Joshua
that.
go?
Censor light. But what I would say, our mindset has changed to where we look like when we're in the space of like, okay, we have needs that need to be met, right? And not every church can fill those needs. So whether it be financial needs, whether it be actual needs of, needing people to help you, to assist you with watching children, right? We're having someone to, even for a couple of hours, like a Mother's Day out, right? So I think of it from a different perspective of like different churches have different ways to give people what they need. And I think it's on us as well as caregivers to go out and look for those different ways as well. For whatever need you need. So like for me and my family, I'll just say this: it was a time where we just needed spiritual help. We just needed someone to encourage us, to lift us up spiritually. Then it was a time where we actually needed financial help, and at that moment we couldn't get that, right? And so what we had to do was look, okay, where can we go to find the help that we need? And I think as we go through different journeys and through just different times of life, we're going to require different things from churches.
Yeah, and I also just think that like as far as it's not one category that I could say, but I feel like if nothing else, at least just being there and being a listening ear and just having the compassion and having and wanting to have the understanding and just wanting to be there, like actual, I don't know what to call that, like, but just real support to where it's just like you and them. If it's at your house, if they take you out to eat for lunch or whatever it is, like just to get your mind, even like if some, like for me, sometimes I don't want to just talk about like my special needs kids. I just want to talk about life. I just want to talk about whatever. So it's like having someone there to just distract me or just to comfort me, just to be a friend, be a listening ear. And I feel like that alone would be enough for me. If I didn't have financial, if I didn't have all the other categories, I feel like just having that friendship and, well, I guess that's what it would be, like friendship and companionship. I feel like those are huge for me, at least.
I'm going to step in and say something. So we had a mom that I actually was able to travel with for a while with Sunshine, helped with a little bit of a dream trip for her and her family. And I remember one of the things that she shared is people would say, "How can I help?" And even people from her church, "How can I help?" And she would say, "This is how you can help." And they wouldn't do what the things that she asked or needed. And she said one of the biggest things was she would say, "Just come over and have a cup of coffee with me. Just sit and talk with me." And I really do think that, Crystal, what you said is true. I think that is one of the biggest ways, is just being friends and being a support that just regularly and consistently shows up. And it doesn't have to mean all the time, but for an hour here and there is meaningful, and kind of moving into however it's the most convenient for the caregiver. And I think that's the key. It's not always convenient to go to church. We hear a lot of people that aren't able to go to church on Sunday. So
Yeah, I would
I
echo
think
that.
that
I think that's a huge thing that has come up again as we talk with caregivers all the time. I always like to remind people that it's sometimes supporting caregivers just is being a friend. Like it just looks like being a friend. And, checking in, coming over to hang out, because the isolation is such a big part of it for so many families. So you lose those social connections. So it really doesn't always, obviously there's bigger picture things that need to happen, but just on that really practical day-to-day level, it's like, how do you be a good friend? That's what everyone needs. And as you build those relationships, then it becomes much easier to help in other ways because you're aware of the needs, the family, you get to know each other. So I love that you brought that up for sure.
And I think that goes back to that question or what you brought up earlier when pastors are like, yeah, our church is welcoming. Um, I think it's those are again, and we said this, you need to ask the question of what are your needs, and then you need to listen to the answers. Because I think a lot of times, and I'm going to include myself in on this as the church, I think a lot of times we prescribe what the needs are. Um, when the reality is it's not a one size fits all. You asked the question, Amanda, what area? The thing is, you talk to 12 different families, you're going to get 12 different answers on that. And so I would like to say, as a person who has been on church staff, but also has been on the other side of being a caregiver, it's I remind myself sometimes it is hard as a church because every family is different. But I think if we can, as the church, be realistic about that and say, okay, we really don't know Jack. So we just got to ask the question. We got to humble ourselves and just ask the question of what is the need? And that might be something we've never thought about. So we've got to go, okay, I got to retrain my thought on this. And if that's their need, we got to be willing to meet that need right there because it just is not one size fits all. It would be so much easier if it was. As a caregiver, it would be so much easier. And I just think of you guys, y'all have two of them. And I would bet that there are days that the needs are completely different for the two of them, you know? So,
Yeah, I think that, and what I'm hearing there is churches or different organizations just have to be willing to listen, just have to be willing to ask the question, sit down, and then act on it and not say, okay, thanks for telling us that, but then here we actually just set this up for you, and now you can volunteer as a part of the listening. Awesome. All right, we are running out of time. Any other final thoughts y'all would like to share, especially in that, we want to share this with, be living on, hopefully, in YouTube website, that kind of thing. What, do you want to leave with, especially faith communities that you would hope that they would know about caregiving families and how they could support you? Just casually wrap it all up in 1 to 2 sentences, right?
If I could wrap it up in 1 to 2 sentences, I'll say I could use one word, right? Try. And that's what I would say. Because if you have to make an effort, right? Just make an effort, try, right? Reach out your hand and see and just try because I know it can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable because, not knowing what to do, right? That's uncomfortable, but just try. That's what I would say.
Good.
Amazing. Yeah.
that's real good. Yeah.
Yeah, that is trying and effort. And I like Greg said, be kind, take time to listen. That's true. Like just be kind and don't like outcast people and just try to make them feel included as much as possible. Inclusion.
Greg said, know that advice isn't always welcome, but a helping hand is invaluable.
Mm.
I think that's
I was going to say, like, I think some practical things, like if you can meet some practical like needs for people, I think it goes like such a long way. Like I can remember at the very beginning of Averly's diagnosis, people showing up and we had like started to cut down a tree and it needed to be like finished, like it needed to whatever. And like two of our good guy friends stopped by and they were tearful and like just kind of like, what can we do? And I'm like, can you just finish the tree? Like, if you guys could just finish that tree, that would be excellent. Like, it's just like some practical things. It's like, can I go get you groceries? Or can I make sure that can I bring you lunch to your house and sit with you and eat it? Like, just some real practical needs. And I think if churches were more willing to show up for those pieces of things, I think that that would make a huge difference. And I don't know, maybe that looks like respite care, or just a whole group that's just respite care. And what does that look like? And um, I think there's a lot of people who would be willing if there was an avenue for it, and I think the willingness, the try, like that's huge. Like just be willing to ask and see and and attempt to just meet physical needs, because then you're going to see the other needs that are needed along the way, kind of like what you were saying, Amanda. Like if you show up, you're going to start to see, if you start to meet one of those needs, you're going to start to see where there's other needs and be able to help. So I think it's just a willingness.
Yeah.
And I would say, by the way, Joshua, I think you wrapped it up for all of us, and that just try that. Like I'm like, okay, we're done.
Everyone's on board. Yeah.
So the thing I would add to that is comma and keep trying, because one of the things that I learned as a caregiver is some days I'm just so overwhelmed. So when you ask me what I need, I might not know it that day. I might not even know it that week. But maybe if you come back a month or two later, my head might be on a little bit straighter. And I might can answer that question at that point. So just because you ask the question, if you don't get an answer right now, then I would just say try and keep trying. Even if you don't feel like you're successful at first in helping that caregiver, come back the next week or come back the next month and try again.
That's really good. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. If you are looking for more on this topic, we have put together a toolkit in partnership with Spreading Sunshine with information for faith communities on how to become more caregiver friendly. Takes a lot of these ideas and puts them into practical guides, articles with different tips and strategies. And you can find that at caregiverdoc.com/faith. And then you can also bring the film Unseen to your church or place of worship to recognize the caregivers in your community, or start this conversation with your own members and community about how to better support these families. So you can find out more about that too on our website, caregiverdoc.com/host. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Really appreciate you being here and adding your insight. So helpful.